On the recent pilgrimage to India, I gave quite a few impromptu talks which involved translators. I'm suddenly feeling very lonely. Because someone's come and stand next to me and pretend they're being. So we're nearing the end at Sangha Night of a theme which started after Christmas called Encounters with Reality, Meeting the Tantric Guru. So Tantric Buddhism uses the energy of strong, direct experiences such as anger, fear, falling in love, to help us break through to reality. And traditionally, the Tantric Guru would be a highly advanced teacher who you would meet with one-to-one. They would be your personal teacher, and they would tell you exactly what you needed to do to break through delusion and bring you face-to-face with reality. So this model of having our own personal guru tends not to work so well in the West. All sorts of complications and misunderstandings can arise as we project onto this guru figure. Individualism is such a strong feature of our society. So in Triratna, rather than having a personal guru, the emphasis has been on providing intimate, collective team contexts. So Buddhists with a range of levels of experience, living together, working together, studying and meditating together, building strong friendships with each other. Because the fact is, we get to know ourselves better in relation to other people. We get to know ourselves best in relation to others. When I'm feeling particularly uptight or self-obsessed or self-righteous, I sort of make fun of myself. I say something like, everything would be okay if it wasn't for other people. But actually, we develop more quickly and more easily through deep individual-to-individual contact with other people, particularly those who share our highest aspirations. Although ultimately it's us who has to make the effort, we do need the encouragement of others, the enthusiasm of others, and sometimes the challenge of others. And close contact with other people can help us in all sorts of ways. So other people can bring out the best in us. So you might be able to think of people that when you're around them, you feel lighter, more energetic, more playful, more cheerful. We can be perfumed by others' ethical qualities. We find ourselves to be kinder, more generous, more open when we're around those people, or we feel a stronger heart connection with our highest ideals when we're with them. So being in close contact with others can help us to express ourselves better, to express the best in us. And the other side of the coin, of course, is that other people can bring out the worst in us. Though in the context of spiritual development, this is also seen as a good thing. It's a win-win situation. Other people can touch our raw nerves, they can press our buttons, and we can find ourselves behaving in ways that really don't fit in with our view of ourselves. All sorts of things can go on. So for me, examples are explosions of anger, bursting into tears, sudden uprushes of anxiety and fear, intense crushes, all sorts of things can go on. Our view of ourselves as a nice, relatively sane, friendly, balanced Buddhist can just go up in flames. And that's great. That's what we want. We can no longer hide bits of ourselves away, present a neatly edited version of ourselves. We just have to let it all come up to the surface. All the mess, all the frailties, all the conflicts, all the complexities. Because we can't transform ourselves unless we have a full sense of what lies within us. A realistic sense of who we are. So being in close contact and communication with others who share our values can really help us to get to know ourselves and start to bring together all the energies that we've tried to push down, ignore, snuff out, put in a box. So tonight, we're going to be focusing particularly on the area of working with others as a key way of helping us to develop. So working with others can be our Tantric Guru. Working with others can be our spiritual teacher. So many of us spend a lot of time in work situations, a high proportion of our life in work situations. The fact is that we need to support ourselves. And some of us might be lucky enough to have a vocation that expresses the best in us and that we're quite happy to immerse ourselves in wholeheartedly. But often we find ourselves in work that seems a bit at odds with our spiritual practice. It might not be very meaningful, it might drain our energies, it might just be too stressful, it might throw up big ethical dilemmas. But whatever our work situation, whether paid or voluntary work, it's certain that it will be having a big effect on our lives, for better or worse. So for this reason, the Triratna Buddhist community has always tried to create contexts that allow people to work with other Buddhists in ways that are not in conflict with our ethical values, and which create the conditions for individuals to progress and to contribute something of positive value to the world. And these contexts are known as team-based right livelihood. Team-based right livelihood. And so examples of team-based right livelihood are, well, the teams that run this centre, our educational visits project, Still Learning, and of course, probably the most famous is the Evolution Shop in Orchard Square. So, most of you probably know, some of you don't, that after 20 years in business, the Evolution Shop closed last Friday. And yesterday we held a very moving closing ritual in the shop, which I think Alice is going to tell more about later. So, a week on Friday, that's Good Friday, there's going to be a couple of events which I'd like to warmly invite you all to. So during the day, from 10 till 4, we have one of our Sangha Works Days. So Sangha Works Days, lots of Buddhists come together, we start off with some meditation, and then we do all sorts of tasks around the centre, lots of work available for people of different abilities. And it really gives a taste of what it's like to work in a team of Buddhists trying to make a difference to the centre. And then in the evening, starting from 7 o'clock, we're having a big celebration of the Evolution Shop. So from 7 o'clock, there'll be reminiscences and rejoicings in all the people that have worked in the shop, all the contribution that the shop has made to the centre and to the world. And then at the end of that, there'll be a closing ritual where we transfer 20 years worth of merits. So that's a really sort of momentous day in Sheffield Buddhist Centre's history, which I warmly invite you to be a part of. Okay, so now there's going to be 3 short talks on the subject of work as the Tantric Guru. So one will be by Alice, about working in the Evolution Shop. And then there'll be a talk by Helen about her work as a psychologist. And then finally, a short talk by me about working in Buddhist Centre. So I feel very fortunate that I had the chance to work with Alice in the shop for a number of years. 2 years? 3 years? She's been a very committed and a very friendly member of the Evolution Shop team for 6 years now. What I most remember about Alice, what I most admired about Alice when I worked with her was her openness, actually. Whatever was happening in her life, and sometimes it was quite difficult things, whatever was happening, she always shared it. So you knew where you stood with her. And that encouraged me and others to be open too. And Alice has been particularly committed to making the shop a meaningful Buddhist context where people can really shine and make progress. And of course, Alice has been part of the team that has skillfully and gracefully seen the shop through its final days. The shop has been Alice's main ordination training context. So she asked for ordination just after joining the shop. And this has been a real success story because next week Alice will be leaving Sheffield on her way to Akashavana in Spain, where she will become Sheffield's newest order member. So, So I hand over to Alice, and it's been a real pleasure to see you blossom over the years.
Thank you. Okay, can you hear me? Yeah. Thank you very much, Maitridasa. That was unexpected, but lovely. Yeah, it was a very poignant and significant time to close the shop on Friday. It was our last trading day. 20 years after our dear friend and teacher Sangha Night started it all off with a small group of friends. And we're finishing clearing out the shop tomorrow and handing back the keys. And we had a really moving ritual. That's the third time I've heard it referred to as moving, so it must have been moving. There was about 20 of us there, all people who'd worked or volunteered there together over the 20 years. We dedicated the premises and thanked it and thanked each other for providing such a positive context for transformation. I stood at the till with some incense, and it really got me just standing there where I'd stood so many times, and so much had happened while I was there. The same happened with these guys, Sangha Night and Sophie here. So yeah, here I am giving an account of my own transformation and growth through work, through team-based right livelihood at the Evolution shop. And I started working there just over 5 years actually. I'd been on a younger Sangha weekend retreat, and I'd had so much energy and inspiration coming home. Like I'd hardly slept for a couple of days, and I just knew that I wanted to commit to something that would help me sustain that energy and that allowed me to give that energy back to a project that supported the same values and ideals. And I was really fortunate that there was a full-time position available. Maitridasa gave me a little interview in the green room, and I started in November 2009. I was really inspired by knowing that people that I loved and respected had also worked there and transformed. Sangha Night, Vajratara, who's now at Tirunelloka, Maitrasiddhi, who's now at Taraloka, are all people that I knew and respected and had worked there. And also my friends were working there at the time, Maitridasa, James and Tina. So that already shows how strong the values of Sangha and friendship were providing a basis for trust and teamwork in the shop. And it's really, really hard to distill all of my experiences into this talk. The depth of practice the shop's offered to me and others, it's really hard to describe and really hard to distill. But there's so much I could say about daily practices and different events that have happened, but I can't fit it all in and I can't put it into words, so I'm just going to try and give a little flavour. I want to talk about ethics and kindness and how being in the shop has helped me to be kind. It's provided an opportunity to be kind to customers and also to the team that I work with. So it's a constant practice to remain open to customers, greeting them with a smile, and connecting through conversation, whilst really being quite busy and having other tasks to focus on, like merchandising or stocking up. I tried to be present with the customers, I tried not to judge them, and to always be warm and friendly. And when I was tired or distracted, that was difficult. And working at the till was a really great way for me to become aware of my method practice and where it really was. And it could be really revealing and very grounding. Another precept, stillness, simplicity and contentment. So I was very inspired by and proud that the business ran on values of giving what you can and taking what you need. So this meant that though I was financially supported to work there, I was committed to working there beyond the sense of having compensation for the energy and the work that I was doing. And that helped me to cultivate a broader perspective around happiness that went beyond material wealth as the main source of contentment. And cultivate an attitude beyond work as purely a means to make money. I did see it as a livelihood though, and I can remember lots of times walking in, getting to a particular point in Sheffield just beyond the university roundabout and really connecting with feeling like I was on an arms round, like I'd just go to work with nothing. I didn't need anything else, I just needed to go to work and be there with others, transform. And that life of simplicity and of service to the Sangha was all I needed to do. And I was inspired by how no one person or small set of people were making a lot of money, a lot of personal profit out of the business. It wasn't set up like that. So we were really able to support a lot of people and to give a lot of money back and I was able to exemplify that a simple life can be sustainable and enjoyable. So yeah, that kind of radical business model was also very inspiring. And I was earning half of what I've earned previously, but I can honestly say that I'm so much happier. More about simplicity and contentment is that I was able to become aware of and try to let go of neurotic or anxious states of mind through working in the shop. In other organisations that I've worked in, stress was seen almost as a positive sign of hard work, but it's not like that in the shop. You can't get away with being stressed or snappy or so task-focused that your relationships with the customers or the team are negatively affected, because people would pick you up on it.
Yes.
You just couldn't do it. I tried, but... So yeah, my ideal instead became to bring about effective work as an expression of positive states of mind, of mindfulness, clear and radiant. And effective work here is the task itself, as well as my relationship with other people. Which brings me on to what I really want to say, but it's really difficult to capture. And that's about the teamwork in the shop. Might be quite difficult to talk about, but yeah. So the teamwork is really quite something. It's like being part of a family. We had a volunteer who was from Burma, and she actually referred to us as a family business. She said it was like being in a family business when she was in the shop. I often call Omer Magsa our godfather actually when he comes in. Fondly. Yeah. So yeah, being part of the team offered a chance for me to develop connections and cultivate awareness of other people in a way that's not often possible at work. We were all committed to remaining in harmony with each other, and we always tried to be open with each other, speaking directly and honestly, and always looking to restore harmony should it break down. And I think that's important, because when I went to the shop I thought, oh, we're just going to all get along really well all of the time because we're all Buddhists and it's just going to be great. And obviously when you're working intensely with other people, things come up, like Maitridasa was saying, but what was so inspiring about the shop is we always tried to come back into harmony, tried to be honest and to connect. To restore harmony when it breaks down and not go into backbiting or gossiping, and cultivating a culture without blame. And that was something that I wasn't sure was possible, but it is. I'd never experienced it before. But, yeah. So building friendship and intimacy within a team that way was really challenging, and it provided me with really clear feedback in terms of how able I am to relate to other people and how fixed and separate I prefer to keep myself as a way to try to and attempt to be safe. But I've had to really learn how to see others for who they really are and relate to them outside of my own needs and preferences. An example of this is that, surprisingly, not everybody finds our practice of reporting and connecting. So we go around every day saying how we are, how we feel, but not everybody finds that reflective or connecting. So I really love it, and I found it was a really good way for me to reflect on my life and to transform. But I've had to really look at what values reporting in upholds. I'm looking to connect and looking to understand others and to be in harmony with them. But if not everybody's finding it, that it cultivates that kind of harmony, then I can't just insist upon it. I need to look at who these people are and why they're finding it difficult and how can I connect with them, because that's what I want to do through reporting in. So that's me trying to explain how I try to really see people for who they are and empathise with them. And I feel like I've learned so much in terms of empathy and communication through building those friendships. And that's something that I really miss with my current team. And I'm going to end with a poem that indicates what I'm trying to explain. It's really hard to put it into words, but I think this poem kind of indicates something. And I wrote it at a workshop here a couple of years ago. And we were asked to reflect on moments of stillness. And it's important for me that I wrote this because at the time I was really in doubt as to whether working in the shop could help me to practice stillness and creativity in the way that I wanted to. But when we were asked to reflect on stillness and write about it, I started writing about the shop, about memories of being in the shop and things that were happening there. So this is just a little part of that poem. And I think that shows that actually working in the shop was very integrating, and that I could be creative and really practice wholeheartedly, even in that busy environment. And sometimes it was really, really busy. Yeah. It's got a bit of an eternalist ending, which isn't surprising because I wrote it. But it doesn't quite fit with conditionality and the arising and passing away of all things. But perhaps it hints at an ideal. And it could now be seen, I realised when I read it today, as a nod to the potential charity shop that could arise here in Sheffield, and the magic that can happen in team-based right livelihood. And we could all get involved in that charity shop, when or if it happens. So. It's about eye contact. Not stillness, really, but a welcome interruption of flurried thought. I look into the eyes of others. I see their struggle and their hope, and know that they see mine. Piercing truth that cuts through preoccupation, through mistrust and doubt, connecting. We speak but seldom see, so catch it when you can. Feel that space, breathe into that space, without tumult or fear, see how long it will last, and maybe, next time, it will not end.
Okay, can you hear me? Yes, I can. So, I wanted to start with the last line of a poem by Mary Oliver, which Liz Annabelle read out really beautifully at an event I was at on Saturday, and just really has been going around in my head since then. And she writes, "Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life?" So initially, when I was asked to give this talk, I was a bit puzzled, and I realised that this isn't normally how I think about my work as a tantric guru. And I was thinking perhaps it's because I've got a slightly wrong view of a tantric guru, that somehow that needs to be really hard or somehow very shattering. And I was thinking, well, actually, at the moment in my life, my work generally feels quite enjoyable and quite pleasant, so somehow it can't possibly be the tantric guru for me. So when I think about how I do relate to my work, sometimes it's just on a very practical level, that it's something which earns me enough money to support me doing the things which I really value. And that used to be going climbing and going running. And increasingly that's now more about spending time at the centre and my Buddhist practice and my friendships and being a mum. At other times my work really does feel like a vocation. It's about how I express my Buddhist practice. And sometimes it really does genuinely in the moment feel the best thing that I could possibly be doing with my life. In particular using the skills and training that I have. But I haven't really reflected much before on how my work is constantly changing, is constantly conditioning me, when Maitridasa was saying. And yet it must be, when I think about it, for better or for worse. Because I currently do my paid work 2 days a week, but when I was reflecting on it, I was thinking that's probably still about twice as long as I spend meditating. So it's going to be having an effect. And I just had this sense of, gosh, am I missing a trick here? Could I really relate to my work in a different way? And it's been really, writing this talk has been a catalyst for reflecting on perhaps how work could be more of a tantric guru for me, but also perhaps how it does function that way, but that I don't give it its full credit. I'll come back to that at the end, that somehow I can get into a pattern of relating to my work as something that I have to do or is done to me, rather than something I choose. So my work is as a clinical psychologist. I decided to train as a clinical psychologist when I was 17. I decided that's what I wanted to do with my life. I was thinking back and remembering that as a small child I had a really strong response to suffering in the world, which a lot of this talk's going to be about. I remember going on my first visit to the cinema, which my parents took me, thinking it'd be a really nice treat, I think. And we went to see Bambi. And I remember crying inconsolably at the part where I think Bambi's mum gets shot. I'm not entirely sure of the plot of Bambi anymore. I think I've always had that strong response to suffering in films, in stories, and in other people's lives when I meet them. There was also a strong ethic around altruism and around helping others in my family, a strong sort of public service ethic, and both of my parents worked in teaching. I also experienced a fair amount of suffering of others quite directly within my family. And I do think as a young child, one's natural reaction to that is to want to make it better. So at 17, I knew that I loved studying, and I also loved ideas, and I was very interested in how the mind worked. But I also really wanted to use that knowledge practically to help people. And clinical psychology just seemed a really good way to do that. But I also remember being quite calculating even at that age, that I did really want to help people, but I also remember choosing that I wanted to do it in a way that I could get as much money and as much status as I could. Which was a bit embarrassing as a Buddhist somehow, confession in there. So it's a pretty long, hard route to train as a clinical psychologist. And I just made it at the point where I first turned up in this Buddhist centre. It was about 9 years ago. So I'd worked towards this qualification for about 10 years previously, doing various bits of voluntary work and then study. And I'd finally achieved it. And I think underlying what was going on for me then was quite a profound sense of unease, because I'd worked and worked and worked through all these hoops towards this thing that I thought was really going to make me happy. And then it wasn't quite that. It wasn't working, it wasn't doing it for me. At that time I was working in my first job. I was really stressed out, and I was working as part of a team whose remit was to provide support to a group of struggling schools in an old pit village. And in that area there were a lot of problems with children with behaviour and attendance at the schools. And it was kind of underlined by what was quite an understandable sense of despair in the local community and a strong distrust of authority, including the services like us who claimed to be trying to help. So there was just loads of suffering there. And I think my response to that was this sense of like, oh, I've got to fix it. And I'd come up with these slightly grandiose schemes of trying to get everyone involved in like a whole school anti-bullying policy and trying to somehow exert a kind of cultural change in these schools. And then, of course, nobody was quite as enthusiastic about it as I was. And things would sort of feel flat and people wouldn't be that interested. And then I just get very discouraged and feel very useless. I was very stressed and very anxious. And I was having a lot of what I now know are migraines. So I was kind of starting to get into trouble for being off sick quite a lot as well. And it was interesting coming to the introductory course here that I did feel this sense of coming home, that there was a community of people here that also cared about helping people. And I think at that point I'd started to feel that maybe I was a bit soft or a bit weak for caring, for having those aspirations. Almost that my sensitivity to suffering was a sign that there was something wrong with me. So something very affirming about coming here and starting to practice the Dharma. I'm taken back to a memory, really clear memory, of a particular Tuesday night. And I think I must have been coming to the centre about 6 months. I was quite cynical, I think, at the beginning. I didn't really believe in this Buddhism. But what I'd noticed reliably is that if I came to Sangha Night on a Tuesday night, the rest of my week would just be a lot better. So I just sort of kept coming. And on that Tuesday night, there was a young female order member standing on the stage where I'm standing now, called Vajratara, who's now a very good friend of mine. And she was giving a talk on a bodhisattva called Avalokiteshvara, whose picture is up, a very beautiful picture is up here. I didn't know Vajratara very well at the time. I think I found her a bit scary. I think I probably found all order members a little bit scary at that time. And she was clearly going through quite a lot in her life. I've listened to that talk again recently on a CD, and she sort of prefaces it by saying, apologising that it might be a sort of rambly emotional mess. But there was something in that talk and in that story that spoke so strongly to me. And it sort of feels like, in a way, the rest of my life has come from that experience. It was the first talk, although not the last, I've come to at Sangha Night that made me cry. I just had a really strong sense of sitting probably about where Janet was there and just being a bit embarrassed because I was getting really tearful that something had really touched me. So I'm going to tell you the story briefly because some people might not know it. So the story goes that the Avalokiteshvara, who initially looked much more like a normal human being with 2 arms and 1 head, was greatly moved by the suffering that he saw all around him in Tibet, and he made a great vow. And he vowed that he'd save all the people in Tibet from suffering, and he would work tirelessly to that end. He also made a wish that if he should hesitate, even for 1 moment, that his body would shatter into 1,000 pieces. So he went off into a cave. He undertook what I believe to be was a profound meditation on compassion, probably for several years. And then he emerged from his meditation and sort of looked around him and found that not, apparently the story goes, that not even 1/100th of the people of Tibet had been helped. And at that point he just lost confidence, and he just had this sense of, oh, this is not going to work, I can't do it. And at that point the story goes that, true to his vow, his whole head and body shattered into pieces. And when that happened, he cried out in agony to the Buddha Amitabha and cried out for help. He asked for help, and Amitabha came and put him back together, but this time in the form that you see here. So he has 10 heads, so he can see in all directions, his compassion, and he has 1,000 arms, with which he can be much more helpful to all beings. And what I took from that story, I just had a huge sense of resonance with Avalokiteshvara's idealism, but also with this slightly human egotism in the story of this vow that I'm going to save all beings, me, which I think was kind of what I was doing at the time, and probably a cycle that I kind of go through again and again. And I cried because I could feel in myself that sense of shattering when I realised that just wasn't possible, that I couldn't save all beings. In fact, I probably couldn't save anybody. That wasn't the solution, that wasn't going to work. And what I took from that story was that the solution was that I don't have to do it on my own. In fact, there's no way I can do it on my own, that's not possible. That I can't be this great bodhisattva that saves people, but that I can, by working with others, be one of his hands and be part of a solution and have a positive effect in the world. So I now work in a different field. I work as one of the directors and as a therapist in a small private organisation which provides therapy for children in the care system. So these are extremely troubled children who can't live with their birth families, have really distressing experiences in their lives, and who are currently living in safety with foster and adoptive parents. So my work consists in helping these children learn to gradually trust these new adults who are trying to care for them, and also in helping the adults to understand and just bear exactly how hard these children find it to trust people and allow themselves to be cared for. And I often have a strong sense of Avalokiteshvara in these foster and adoptive parents, that they've chosen to do this amazing altruistic work because they have a strong sense of compassion with how these children have suffered, and they really want to help. And at the point where I meet them, all too often, they've had that shattering experience. They've started to realise that it's not what they hoped, and that the child isn't making the progress that they hoped. Often the love that they're giving to this child is being kind of batted back, sometimes with violence, often with a lot of withdrawal, and they're starting to feel themselves pulling away from this child as well. So my work brings me into profound contact with other people's suffering, and what that brings up to me is what I think is quite a fundamental Buddhist question. And I've seen there's this little equation, and I think this might have come out of something, certainly in conversations I've had with Kate Arrowsmith, and I don't know if it's hers originally, this little equation, or certainly Shirimati saying no, that it comes out of some banter, guessing, don't know.
It's the positive nidanas.
Yeah. So it's the positive nidana chain, which is the start of the way out of the wheel of life for all of us. So the first 2 steps of the spiral path are that suffering leads to faith. And I've always thought that slightly strange, because that's not necessarily my experience of suffering most of the time. If suffering inevitably led to faith, then, well, I'd probably be enlightened, most of you would probably be enlightened, and certainly all of the children that I work with would be enlightened. So it's like there's got to be something else in there as well, otherwise it would all be fine for all of us. So I thought I'd just explain a little bit about what is meant by faith here. So in Buddhism, that doesn't mean a blind sort of belief in anything in particular, or an adherence to any particular doctrine. It can also be translated as confidence, which resonates for me more, that it's a real confidence of what I can trust in myself and what I can trust in the world. Sangha Night talks about it as the emotional response of what is ultimate in us to what is ultimate in the universe. And it has all of these aspects, that it combines the best of both reason and emotion. It contains elements of knowing that something is true, loving and admiring the beauty that's in that truth, and also a longing to move towards that, to discover that more in me. And so my felt sense of that is it's the part of me that just knows, the part of me that knows what's of value and also knows what to do in this moment, what needs to be done next. And when I'm experiencing that sense of Shraddha, which sometimes I experience in a puja, sometimes I experience in meditation or in a solitary retreat, but I also can strongly experience in my work when I'm really connecting with with an individual human being. It's like the self part of me, the ego part of me is actually quite small. I'm somehow very confident in myself at one level, but it's also like it's not about me. It suddenly becomes not about me. And I just know that when I'm in touch with that sense of knowing and that sense of faith, I'm much better at doing my job, even whatever that may involve at the time. So I don't have an easy answer as to what the question mark is. I think my experience points me more and more towards a combination, that it's a combination both of accepting reality as it is and of somehow responding to that with love, that both are necessary, having a bigger perspective and of responding with love. And sometimes when I'm at work and I'm really struggling with a particular child or a particular grown-up or a particular system, I kind of would think like, how would the Buddha see this situation? How would he respond? Or at a more personal level, how would Vajratara respond? How would Moksha Leela, another good friend of mine, what would they do in this situation? And when I kind of look above me at that level, there's almost always some combination both of having more perspective, of seeing a bigger picture, and also of responding with kindness. But all that feels quite big and abstract. I can't just make myself have more perspective or be kinder by just telling myself to do it. So I thought it might be helpful instead to talk about the patterns I see in myself that get in the way of that. So almost to think about what this question mark isn't. So the first thing that gets in the way for me is this view that I've got to do it all by myself and it's my responsibility to fix it, which is actually quite a large amount of ego in that. And I've noticed that the more stressed and anxious I get, the greater tendency I have to want to do things by myself and also to do things my way. So paradoxically, the busier and more stressed I am, the less likely I am to be able to ask anybody to help me. And also the more rigid I get about my way being the only way I can get things done, which of course then makes other people much less likely to want to help me. So I think just remembering the myth that Avalokiteshvara can help here, that I'm just a hand, I just have to be a hand. There's lots of other hands there too, and I don't have to do it on my own. Other people know what they're doing, and I don't have to be in control or know what the answer is. In my work, this often just involves trusting in the foster carers, the adoptive parents I work with, in their creativity, their knowledge of their child, and their desire to love them. And that if I can just listen attentively and almost stop my anxious self from jumping in prematurely and telling them what to do, then the best solutions usually come from them themselves, not from my ideas. The second thing that gets in the way, that does not lead to faith in my experience, is feeling guilty. For me, this is linked to a strong tendency to perfectionism and also a tendency to base my sense of whether I'm doing okay on whether other people approve or whether what I'm doing makes other people happy. I think I can easily get into feeling guilty as well at a more kind of existential level, that somehow I feel guilty that my life is quite happy. That's something I had to really work with as a Buddhist, that actually my desire is to be happier as a human being, and that there's nothing wrong with that. It also means not taking responsibility for other people's mental states. Other people's mental states aren't my fault, and nor can I fix them, no matter how much I try. I can easily drop into feeling guilty when I make mistakes at work, which I do all the time, and it's the nature of what I do. It's probably the nature of what all of us do. There's probably a whole talk of guilt in here, but I think I have strong conditioning that somehow guilt is a good thing, that it will make me act more ethically in the future. Whereas in fact my experience is that when I feel guilty, that actually stops me from connecting deeply with other people. That actually, when I go into guilt, I just descend into a self-centered spiral of I'm awful, which then cuts me off from kindness, not just towards myself, but towards others. So the third thing that suffering that doesn't lead to faith in combination with suffering would be blaming others. So that's getting into criticism, judgment. And actually I think that is usually feeling guilty for me, that I've got this secret fear that I've done something wrong, and therefore it's like that there must be somebody else's fault. And I see that quite often in others as well, in the systems I work with, that it's if only the social worker would do this, if only the teacher would do this, and that comes to me as well around if only the therapist would sort this out. So I think having a Buddhist perspective is quite helpful here, and just that sometimes suffering just is, and just accepting that rather than if that person was just doing their job right, then we'd fix it. So I thought I'd finish by just mentioning some of the conditions that I think I need in order for my work to act as a tantric guru for me, for it to be a way of moving closer to reality rather than just getting pulled into these repetitive cycles of suffering. So the first thing I need is space. I need breaks and I need time to reflect. I find my meditation practice incredibly important. I really need to meditate before I go to work. I need to be deeply in touch with my own experience, which I think Helen and Maitridasa both alluded to. I need to be in touch with my own suffering in order to be able to see and meet the suffering of others. If I'm blocking my own experiences in my own life and I'm cut off to my own mental states, then on my experiences I'm also cut off to those of others, and I'm much less helpful as a therapist. Over time I've developed more and more confidence that actually it doesn't really matter what my mental state is at the moment, as long as I'm in touch with it and I'm making an attempt to meet it with metta. I've had strong experiences of spending most of a morning meditation session crying with frustration, fear, anger about issues in my own life, and then taking a deep breath, walking into work, often having a strong sense of connection with other people. I'm looking at Alice in particular here, who I know in my life, and imagining them doing exactly the same. And then managing to go into sessions with clients who suddenly open up about the things that are really deep and important to them in their life. Whereas when I'm a bit blocked in myself, I'm much more likely to go into this I've got to fix it mode and less open to other people. The second thing I need is friendship and positive people outside of my work life. I think it feels really important to me that I work in a team and we have good communication within our organisation, and that we really try to support and nurture our staff and encourage them to grow. But I also find it crucial to have relationships and deep friendships in the Sangha. I just remember the early sense when I used to come to Sangha Night all those years ago, and it was like I would come and I'd charge up with positivity, and then I'd be sort of charged up with all this positivity and metta, which would gradually then ebb away through my work week, and then I'd come back on a Tuesday night and get charged up again. I now feel I've got a better balance between having much more joyful and positive activities in my life. It's really important for me to have a chance to connect with others, and with beauty and hope in the world, as well as with the suffering that I see in my work. And I just think balance is really important, and knowing yourself and what I need. So actually working 2 days a week, connecting deeply with people suffering feels like enough to me at the moment. I wouldn't want to do it more hours than that. And the final thing for me that's felt really important is something I've put under the title commitment, and it's the thing that's really hard to articulate. So this has felt really important to me, to sort of work out for myself that I really do believe what I'm doing at work, in what I'm doing at work. I can tend to be a bit of a fence sitter, and I can see seeing the grass is kind of always greener on the other side. And I can get into real fantasies about, if only I worked with Buddhists, or if only I decided to go and live and work in a retreat centre. Unfortunately, I've got good friends who work in both of those settings, which is a good antidote to these fantasies that would just be pleasant. What I realised was a bit behind these views was that I kind of had a sense of my work as something I had to do, that I was being made to do, almost like when you're at school and your mum and dad make you go, or your teachers make you go. I think that's quite a predominant view of work in our culture, that it's sort of something that's done to us. And this was even me as quite an empowered role as a director of the company I work for. So over the last couple of years, it's been very helpful for me to separate out my commitment to my work, my love for my work, and my love for the business that we've created. And to separate that apart from the number of hours I'm choosing to be paid to work for it. It feels very countercultural somehow that my commitment to my job isn't measured by the amount of hours I do it. And it took quite some communication with the other directors of my business for me to realise that it actually wasn't them who was thinking I was a lazy slacker and I wasn't committed somehow for working 2 days a week. Actually, that was me. That was my conditioned voice inside my head, kind of thinking that wasn't enough somehow. But I do think at the time of those conversations, they were probably picking up on a sense I was giving off that I wasn't quite sure I really wanted to be there. And I do think that that's something I work with and I'll continue to work with, and I need to come back to again and again. Particularly when work feels a bit difficult or a bit draining, or I'm not as inspired. So it's been quite helpful writing this talk, just in terms of seeing what I am getting from my work, as well as what I give to it. How much it actually does serve as context for my practice. So there's something there, I think, for me about having confidence and just trusting that right now this is what I'm choosing to do with my one wild and precious life.
So yeah, work can be a real crucible for our spiritual development. So as Vidanya said last week, the Sangha Night, the founder of Triratna, has provided a helpful framework for thinking about spiritual development. Vidanya used an imaginary flip chart. I'm going to make it real. Okay. So we have integration, positive emotion, spiritual death, and spiritual rebirth. And it's not as though this is a system which is just purely sequential. So you spend years integrating yourself, and then you finish that, then you move on, and then you think, oh, right, I need to be positive. So it's as if these are all different aspects of spiritual practice, and work can work on all of these. Work can have an effect on all of these aspects. And I've been reflecting recently that this system, it doesn't only apply to individuals, but it also applies to teams. So I work on 2 teams in the centre. I'm part of the centre team with Satyajyoti, Bojanaga, Surimati and Vidanya, and we're responsible for running the centre according to the core principles of building a strong Sangha and communicating the Dharma. I'm also part of a team called the Hridaya team. Hridaya means heart. And that team is responsible for the day-to-day details of keeping this centre running smoothly. So keeping it clean, running the office, the library, the bookshop, etc. And these teams aren't static, they're dynamic. So both of those teams have evolved in their history into very, very positive contexts. So the current centre team came together in 2011. So Bojanaga and myself came back from ordination. Satyajyoti also joined. And in the last 4 years, we've come a long way together. So the first stage for us was to get to know each other and to get to know ourselves in relation to each other. to become a united, harmonious, integrated team. So that's the process of integration. And that's never a neat and tidy process. So it has involved a lot of honest communication over the years. Buttons have been pressed, nerves have been jangled, edges have been scraped, individualities have jostled with each other, and we've projected onto each other in all sorts of ways. But over time, we have learned a lot about ourselves, and we are learning how best to concentrate our collective energies. And so for me in this area, one thing that came up to the surface quite early on, it was when I was teaching my first introductory course. And so I was sitting down there, and I think Vidania was teaching, and I was coming up next, and I felt paralysed by fear. And I knew it was fear because my palms were sweaty and I was shaking. And it was sort of out of proportion to the actual situation. And I knew I had to get up and say something in about 3 minutes' time, so I sort of had to do something about it. So I sort of asked myself the question, what is it? And the answer came, you're afraid. And then another question came up, which was, what are you afraid of? And the answer came up, I'm afraid of these people. And another question came up is, why are you afraid of these people? And the answer came, because they're going to hurt me. And so this was something quite deep-seated from past experience. But actually, in that situation, not true. So in those 3 minutes, I sort of named what was going on, and then, of course, afterwards, when I talked to the team, I talked about that, I externalised that, I tried to explain that, and people were very encouraging. People shared their own experiences of fear. And so just that process of naming it and sharing it really sort of burst that, it brought that fear, brought the energy of that fear out into the open. And these days, if I'm just feeling afraid, I just think, why on earth are you afraid? They're all pussycats. Even if I made a complete mess of it, they still tell me I was lovely. So the next stage for the centre team has been to really deepen our friendships, to become a team as much as possible infused with metta and a sense of interconnectedness, to become more emotionally positive with each other. So as part of this, every few weeks we meet away from the centre for a day, and we share deeply about our lives. We report in for about 2 hours, and we discuss our shared vision for the centre, and more than that, we just enjoy each other's company. We eat together, we go for walks, and we have a laugh. And so as the team has evolved, we've developed a lot of mutual support, a lot of encouragement, a lot of appreciation of each other. And we quite often just spontaneously rejoice in each other. So we've really started to get a feel for what each of us brings and what each of us needs. And certainly speaking for myself, I feel a lot closer to people on the centre team. So in the stage of spiritual death, we go beyond seeing ourselves as just individual selves. We go beyond our tight opinions, our strong likes and dislikes, our views, and we start to become less preoccupied with individual stuff and more connected with the common vision, less bothered about making our individual mark on the situation, and more interested in serving the needs of the situation. And I've seen that happen in the centre team. As part of this, we consciously decided to study and meditate and reflect together regularly to really deepen that sense of being a team of Buddhists serving a vision that's much greater than us. It's not all about me, it's about us trying to create something. And for me personally, that's involved stepping up to new challenges. I have a very old story about myself that I'm not leadership material, and it still comes back sometimes. A story that if I take too much responsibility, I'll crumble. And it's definitely a self-view. It's not in reality with the person that I've become, actually. If I only listened to that individual story, I wouldn't get very far. So what I've tried to do is be less bothered about my own version of events based on the past, and pay more attention to what my teammates see in me, and just try and do whatever the situation requires. So an example of that, in 2013, I stepped out of that particular comfort zone and became the centre manager. And I'm pretty sure there'll be more stepping up and stepping out to do in the future. For me, it's been about this sort of tendency comes up to want an easy life. Okay, anything for an easy life. Why do I make things difficult for myself by taking lots of responsibility? But my experience of that approach is that that leads to like a half-life. It's not actually life at all. So if I pay more attention to what other people see in me and encouraging me, then I can lead a fuller life and a better life. And finally, spiritual rebirth. Well, quite simply, the centre team is a very different team now from 2011. We have become something very different. I couldn't have imagined how far I've come personally, but I also couldn't have imagined how far the centre team could have come as a team. We're capable of much more than we could achieve separately as individuals. So our work on the centre team is most certainly doing its job as a tantric guru. And nothing ever stands still, so we're preparing to expand and change shape again. So later in the year, Satyajyoti will move from being part-time to full-time. Alice will join the centre team. Kate is going to join the Hridaya team, the office team. And over the next few years, Videnya and Surimati are going to step back from centre teamwork and redirect their energies and their amazing talents in other directions. So in a way, things have come full circle, or I should say full spiral. Before too long, there will be a new centre team again, back to 2011, continuing our collective process of spiritual development in our attempts to serve this wonderful Sangha. And this centre team context, this expanded centre team, has only been possible because of the incredible generosity of the Sangha. Generosity of money, of time, of friendship, of energy. So I just want to finish by thanking all of you once again for supporting this context that we have benefited from. And more than that, for joining us in this great work, for working with us. There's a lot of people out there who can benefit from our collective efforts, so the work has to go on.